Hey guys, it's Maltha here once again, and today I mostly wanted to just discuss with you about the Ash Breach uniques, the ones that can drop from Ash Breaches and then get upgraded. And the ones I'm talking about are Hand of Wisdom and Action and Choir of the Storm. So I have been told many times that these are amazing and I should make a build with them, and they do look pretty damn good, and I have seen a few people make some very solid builds with them. So what I set out to do was to try and make a Wild Strike crit character based off of a raider, and for these uniques, as I'll show you in a second, it just makes sense to be CI or energy shield based. So I wanted to be Wild Strike, but it of course inevitably turned into Spectral Throw, because Spectral Throw is something like 400 times better than Wild Strike, and it just didn't make any sense after 80 levels to keep playing Wild Strike. So we did end up being Spectral Throw, and I'll go over how you build with these uniques and what you do with them. Long story short, they do give you a bunch of lightning damage, and it becomes a very strong sort of build just based off of lightning damage, some lightning penetration, and you can go crit or non-crit, though non-crit is the much more popular and probably practical option, which I will go over in a second as well. In total, it gives you a pretty fast Spectral Throw type build, can be played with most types of skills that claws can use, and that's entirely up to you guys. So I'll go over exactly what these items are and how you should kind of build around them, because it's been a bit of a learning experience for me. So the items I mostly want to discuss with you specifically for this build are Hand of Wisdom and Action, which are the upgraded version of Hand of Thought and Motion, and Choir of the Storm, which is the upgraded version of Voice of the Storm. And the way you upgrade them is you have this Hand of Thought and Motion, and you use a Blessing of Ash, this is a tool, on the item, and it'll turn into one of these. Now it will always reroll the stats into something completely different, so the original stats don't really matter. What happens here is you gain some WED, some increased dexterity, increased int, but the important things we're looking at are the scalings off of a lightning damage to attacks per 10 intelligence and attack speed per 25 dexterity. Now the attack speed for dexterity isn't very substantial, and you're not really going to be stacking it too much to take that much advantage of it. What we're mostly looking at is the lightning damage per 10 int. Now, first things first, it's very important to be using 2 of these because they do stack. So if you run 1 of these, you're getting 1 to 6 damage, lightning damage per 10 int. If you run 2 at once, so you're dual wielding them, you will then get 2 to 12 lightning damage per 10 int. So you are effectively doubling the effect of one of these claws by dual wielding, which means it's pretty much 100% worth it to run dual wield, and you should never really use a shield with these things if you're going to be stacking int and running this. So the goal is to stack as much int as possible, and a pretty typical amount of int is about 1,000. Some people claim they're going for about 1,300, or they can hit 1,300, and that is probably very doable. Now, what you're looking at in your passive tree is essentially just traveling around to quite a few of the good nodes still, while getting as much int as you can, and at the same time using conversion jewels like Fertile Mind to convert your dexterity into int. And likewise, you can convert your strength from this jewel socket over here into int, which will then do the strength in the surrounding area. And it's pretty popular because then people move over to Unwavering Stance and spend about 10 points doing that, but gaining int at the same time. So I've never personally built a character like this before, stacking a stat, and it feels very counterintuitive. In a lot of times you're going to be taking int from jewels, conversions, and just plain passives over some more desirable things, and your pathing is going to get a bit weird too. And as well as that, your gear ends up demanding a lot of int, so or not demanding, but rather it's very beneficial to get int on all of your gear, so your requirements become a lot more specific. Like I don't have very good gear yet for this build, but int here, int there, int here, some int on my helm, some boots with int, and I'm missing int on my rings at the moment, so I am missing a potential like 100 right there, which of course is scaled by the 23% int. So if you're missing 100 on your rings, that's 120 or so int you're missing, and that's a pretty big deal because the more the merrier. You will start scaling this, you're getting like an extra fucking 1,000 lightning damage or whatever, and at that stage all you're doing is then scaling WED, projectile damage, and elemental damage. So WED becomes really really important, elemental damage becomes really important, and just how you scale it overall through your attack speed and sockets and all that. Now, the most popular version of this build, and probably the one that makes most sense, is non-crit. I personally wanted to play crit because it's a bit more fun for me, and I wanted to see if it could work, because people have already made non-crit versions, and they were very strong, and they're very good, and you should be able to find some out there. So I'm giving it a shot as crit base, and it's hard because you have to fit in so many more passives onto your tree, like Twin Terrors over here, like Heartseeker over here, these over here, and as well as that Throat Seeker. And you're not really hitting that much crit in the long run. So with all my buffs here, I'm hitting 50% crit. With my Golem up, it's like 52 or so, and then with power charges, of which I only have 3, I'm hitting something like 60 crit, and then Diamond Flask fills out the rest, so it's not too bad, but you do have to invest quite a lot to get the crit. The non-crit versions of the build don't grab stuff like that, and then they're free to grab a bit more int on the tree, or travel a bit more to things like Elemental Overload, which gives you good int, and as well as that, you'll probably end up grabbing Unwavering Stance. So it's a little less point heavy, and being non-crit has the benefit of getting Elemental Overload, which is 40% more elemental damage, and should be pretty much up 100% of the time. As well as that, you can run Elemental Focus. Where's one of those? I don't think I have it on me. This guy here. So whereas for my gem setup, I have Spectral Throw, GMP, Wed, Crit Strikes, and Lightning Pen, a non-crit version doesn't have to waste a socket on Crit Strikes, and instead you scale all of your huge amounts of lightning damage you're getting from the 2 claws with Elemental Focus, which is another 50% more multiplier. So in the end, non-crit does kind of just make a lot more sense, and if you want to play a build like this, it's probably the easiest way to go ahead and build the character, to go non-crit, and it quite likely even scales damage higher than the crit version, but I've committed to crit, and that's how I'm going to try and play it. The other problem with crit, of course, is you don't get much crit multi on the tree because the claw specific crit nodes are absolute garbage. There's 24 multi there, and that's fucking it. If it was a dagger, for example, then the crit would make a lot more sense because you can get all this multi here, and it becomes pretty worthwhile in the end. So my crit multi is not very sexy at the moment. It's like 300%, and yeah, that's just not amazing, but there are still a few things I'm going to work towards in changing that. So anyway, crit's how I've decided to build, and I've got about 1,000 int at the moment. All you're doing is stacking as much int as possible for your lightning damage here, and it becomes your source of energy shield too. So right now I've got 8,200 energy shield with something like 70 or 80% energy shield from the tree, which is mostly coming from this here, a bit here, and these here. So you really don't stack that much energy shield anymore. You're mostly just doing int and letting that do all of the work. And it's a bit counterintuitive in that sense because it just doesn't feel right, but in the end it does work out if you stack enough, which means your actual items become very important for how much energy shield you can get. So mine aren't amazing right now. I've got 150 here, 180 here, and 640 here, so it's not anything too mind-blowing. The belt, a crystal belt, will go a very long way, and this hubris took me quite a while to craft, but yeah, anything like 300 plus is really good there, while still focusing on your int everywhere. So in the end, you scale that, and it becomes huge amounts of damage from lightning from int. And with the crit build, I'm supplementing it with a Choir of the Storm. So what this does is it gives you critical strike chance increased by uncapped lightning resist. Now what that means essentially is anything over 0 is going to increase your crit strike chance by that 1%. So currently I am 178 over 0, meaning I will gain 178 critical strike chance from this amulet. You can see this here because I currently have 50 crit. Take it off, I lose 14% crit basically. So it is very strong, but of course when you go into Merciless or into maps, you do lose a good 60 lightning resist there, so I'll only be overcapped by 135, let's just say, meaning it's 135% crit. So it really helps go a very long way to capping our crit, or at least getting better crit. And on top of that, the level 20 lightning bolt when you deal a critical strike isn't the worst damage either, and it's got a cooldown time of 0.5, so you're firing out 2 of these a second basically most of the time, and it's a decent bit of damage, something like half of what my spectral throw is right now. So more or less might even double my output from spectral throw, based off of the average damages and how often you can get them out. Something like that. Anyway, not double, it's just a chunk of extra damage. Now, I've chosen to run Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice just so I can shatter things, and as well as that, have a curse on hit with Assassin's Mark. I'm still going to be figuring out the build over the next couple of days, so I'll have another video probably updating you about that and how it's going. Long story short, we're Spectral Throw using Reaper Spectral Throw effect. You can now buy that, by the way. And I get my leech here, my mana leech as well over here. I'm a raider, so I'm going frenzies everywhere. I have the Avatar of the Veil for status immunity, bit of extra damage, and I run a Vinctars to have a lot of extra survivability. And I was talking about Ellie Focus. The reason you can run Ellie Focus on the non-crit build is because Vessel of Vinctar will always shock for you, of course. Probably all I need to say for now about these Esh items. They are currently very strong and also pretty flavor of the month, so a lot of people are playing them, and they are incredibly powerful when built correctly. So int gear is a bit hard to come by. Sometimes you may have to craft your own. I have done a bit of that. I've crafted this, bought this pretty cheap and then linked it. You know, You'll have to get a bit creative to get your int, but I'd say anything over 900 int is something like what you're aiming for, and ultimately, if you can, as much as you can, 1300 sounds fucking amazing, and that'll scale your ES to higher and higher levels, and this build should indeed end up being viable for absolutely everything. So I'll leave you with that for now. Thank you very much for watching, and see you guys next time.